Dear learners, I am Christina Georgy, your academic counselor for the course code MEG-05, which is titled Literary Criticism and Theory. Today we will focus our attention towards some of the most important areas to cover with respect to your soon approaching TEE. So as I always emphasize, this is a specialized session specifically designed for the MEG learners. Hence, all the aspects that we discuss today will be solely based on or limited to the prescribed study material and syllabus for this course code, which is MEG-05. So as this session is specifically devoted to your TEE preparation, the very first aspect that you should take care of is regarding question pattern. For that matter, I have shared previous question papers with you, because in case of poetry it was slightly different, in the sense there we had around 10 blocks. Here we just have 8 blocks, and it's not specific works that we have to study. So this would be much more easier for us to cover. So please make sure that you have your textbooks with you. You don't have to write answers as per the order, provided you put the correct question numbers. That is, if by any chance you wrote in the order of your preference and failed to put the correct question number, you would certainly be in trouble. But if you have managed to put the correct question number and you have written the correct answer, it would be fine, because there are choices given. Okay? Yeah. So firstly, let's move on to block 1, an introduction. So even when I taught you this block in detail, I told you that this is a very crucial block, in the sense the first few units of this block serves as an introduction to the entire course. For that matter, we discussed Unit 1 in our very first counseling session. Unit 1 gives you an introduction to literature, criticism and theory. There we saw what is literature, what is literary theory, and who is a literary theorist or a literary critic for that matter. There would be no question from this particular unit. You don't have to prepare for the TEE from this particular unit. Nevertheless, without having a clear-cut idea of the concepts mentioned in this particular unit, you will never be able to successfully complete your TEE with respect to this particular paper, MEG-05. So this is for your general understanding, and I am very sure that each and every student present here who has attended the sessions regularly, who has attended the sessions regularly will be so very thorough with this Unit 1 and the most important concepts mentioned in Unit 1. You don't have to worry for the TEE with respect to this particular unit. Is that clear? And with respect to Unit 1, I would actually like to grab your attention towards page number 12. If you could look into page number 12, there you find a mention of Roman Jakobson. I am very sure that you are familiar with Roman Jakobson, because we discussed him in detail in our other blocks. You remember in which block? Yeah. So right now I would like to grab your attention towards this particular Russian American linguist and literary theorist, Roman Jakobson, because in a very recent TEE I saw a mention regarding Roman Jakobson. He was asked as if a sub-question for the short question, the compulsory question. Roman Jakobson was a sub-question there. So for that matter, was that December 2022? Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, maybe for December 2022, Roman Jakobson was asked. And while you frame your answers, make sure that you write all the relevant aspects. There is also a brief mention of him regarding the tripartite structure that he put forth regarding the act of communication. It is mentioned on page number 12. Make sure that you read that aspect also and include this in your answer if at all you are attempting a question on Roman-Jakobson, because I told you unit 1 would not be necessary for a detailed study with respect to your TEE point of view. That is one aspect that you should take care of. Remember, most of the questions would be essay questions unless they ask you a question on short notes. Alright? You never know, maybe if they feel like asking a short note from this unit, they might. It's all probability. So far I haven't seen any specific question with respect to unit 1. Is that clear? Yeah, good. Now we'll move on to unit 2. Unit 2 is titled Overview of Western Critical Thought. There you see Plato, Aristotle, Philip Sidney, and even some aspects regarding early Romanticism. There will be questions from this unit. In the sense, I've already told you this when I taught blocks 2 and 3 in detail. That is, even if they ask you a question, it could be most probably an essay question on Plato or Aristotle. Make sure that you combine points from unit 2 and block 2 together and frame your answers. You don't have to panic. Most of the points in unit 2 are actually repeated as part of block 2. Even if there are any points that are missed out, make sure that you mark them and combine these two and frame your answers. This is the suggestion that I would like to give you. May that be for Aristotle or Plato. Make sure that your answer would actually encompass all the relevant points. Is that clear? I've seen even short questions on Philip Sidney. Even for the recent question paper that we discussed, there was this sub-question, short note question on Philip Sidney. Alright? Yes. Unit 3 actually deals with the 20th century developments. That is, how did literary criticism flourish during the 20th century. There you meet North of Fry and myth criticism. I've seen North of Fry being a question for the short essay. That is the compulsory part. North of Fry has been asked as if a sub-question. That too for December 2022, are you sure? Okay, she's saying so. Yeah. And there we also have an introduction to Marx and Marxism. Okay, make sure that you study what an ideological state apparatus is. Even ideology has been asked for short questions. Beginnings of structuralism, there you saw in the question paper that we displayed, structuralism was also a short question. I've seen Mikhail Bakhtin being a short essay question. And there is also a mention of feminism, feminist theory and criticism. Remember, feminist criticism was also a question for the very recent TEE. But regarding feminist criticism, make sure that you refer to that particular unit, block 6, and write your answers effectively. Combine what all aspects are mentioned here along with block 6 and frame your answers according to the question. There is a brief explanation on post-structuralism and deconstruction. Most importantly, study Foucault. You please study Foucault. Foucault has also been a question, a short question. I've even seen essay questions on Foucault. But those questions were based on the contemporary literary theories. If they ask you a short question, please make sure that you mention his ideas of sexuality too. All those are mentioned in Unit 3. Moving on to Unit 4. So far I haven't seen much questions from here. But this unit deals with the function of criticism. There is this mention of Arnold and literary criticism that I have seen as a short question in one of the previous TEEs. We will discuss in detail once we discuss all these previous questions together, like we did for MEG-1. And there is this mention on Terry Eagleton. That also you might have to study. There wouldn't be an essay question from this unit. Okay. Essay questions might appear from Indian aesthetics, that is unit 5. Let me remind you that this is a unit typically devoted and dedicated to short questions. For every TEE, there will be one compulsory short question from Indian aesthetics. Most probably it could be either Rasa or Svodha. I've seen Aujitya and Dhwani too. Occasionally they ask something else. So please be prepared for a 10-mark short essay from Indian aesthetics. If they feel like asking you an essay question, they could also do so. Never ever skip Indian aesthetics because that is a very important area with respect to MEG-05 and Block 1 in particular. Regarding the next unit, that is Block 6, you don't have to study much, I believe. I haven't seen much specific questions from this particular unit. That is, to sum up Block 1 of MEG-05, remember we are discussing the most important units. With respect to that, you should focus your attention to units 2 to 5, where 2 and 3 would be an overview of the blocks to come. 4 would give you sufficient information on critics such as Arnold and Terry Eagleton, and 5 would undoubtedly be the most important unit from Block 1. So make sure that you study Unit 5 thoroughly. There could be short questions from Rasa theory, Dhwani theory, Svodha, Alamkara, Aujitya, or you never know what they would ask you. So please be prepared. That's all regarding Block 1. Any questions? Were you able to follow me? Okay, good. I'm glad. Okay. So regarding the previous TEE questions from Block 1, I've told you there have been many questions from Indian aesthetics. For example, for the very latest December 2022 TEE, there was this short question on Dhwani theory. So you would actually have to write for 10 marks. Remember, it's a short essay. You will have to provide a brief introduction on Indian aesthetics. Almost 9 out of the 10 learners would forget to do that. It would be ideal if you could give a brief 1 to 2 line description on Indian aesthetics and then start off with Dhwani theory. That would be the ideal way of writing it. And for the June 2022 TEE, there has been a short question on Svodha. Svodha is also another theory mentioned, and this has been repeatedly asked over the years. For example, for the December 2021 TEE also, there was this question on Svodha. If you look into this particular question paper of December 2021, you can see that there has also been another sub-question, a short essay question on Alamkara. Alamkara is basically figures of speech. It's very easy to understand. Make sure that you have a reading on Alamkara too. Nevertheless, the first 3 theories, Rasa, Dhwani and Svodha respectively, are the most important ones for short notes. I mentioned Rasa theory. That has been a question for the June 2021 TEE. If you are wondering whether they have asked any essay questions, they haven't asked many essay questions from Block 1, because even if they might have, that would actually fall into Blocks 2 and 3 respectively. That is, suppose they ask you a question on play 2, anyway you will have to answer based on Block 2. So we would deal with them under Block 2. Now I'll read out a question on Indian aesthetics. There was this question for the December 2019 TE, that is, attempt a critique of Rasa as understood in ancient Indian literature. This is basically an essay question on Rasa theory. So it's up to you to choose or not to choose such a question. Make sure that you have enough and more points to write for a question that you have chosen for 20 marks essay question. Yeah. So that's all regarding an overview of the most important units and most important questions with reference to the previous TEE from block 1. Are you clear so far? Can we proceed to block 2? And let's move on to block 2. So as I mentioned, block 2 is titled Classical Criticism. Here we have a detailed study of Plato and Aristotle. The very first unit is important in the sense it gives you an overview of the features of classical criticism. This could be a straight essay question to elaborate on the various features of classical criticism with specific focus on Plato and Aristotle. They could ask you such a question. Then there could also be specific questions on either Plato or Aristotle, or even to compare and contrast between these two critics. Okay, please make sure that you study block 2 thoroughly, for there would be one essay question for sure from block 2. It could either be on Aristotle or Plato. If it is Plato, they might ask you regarding Plato's main ideas, how art is twice removed from reality, or his views on art, or something like that. Make sure that you give a proper introduction to who Plato is, mention some features of classical criticism. Classical criticism should definitely be mentioned, and then move on to Plato's specific life and works and his ideas, and move on to the specific aspect mentioned in the question, and conclude with a suitable paragraph. You'll have to write for 20 marks, ideally more than 4 to 5 pages. Okay, there is this suggestion that I used to give my students, in the sense, if you are writing answers for literature, that too for the same marks, it would be brilliant if you could limit your answers to the same length. This is not a mandatory thing to do, it's just a tip. Maybe you might not be able to do this, but you could certainly try. But you don't have to write unnecessary stuff to reach a particular length. Content matters. It is important not to write anything irrelevant with respect to this particular paper, MEG-05. Hence, it has been decided as if a compulsory paper. Remember that. If it is a question on Aristotle, they might ask you regarding tragedy. We studied hamartia, tragic flow, the elements of tragedy, and many other stuff. All those could be asked as if an essay question. Okay. There is this mythos and ethos. That concept has also been a question. Mimesis, catharsis. Remember all these technical terms, and remember to write the correct spelling. Even there could be questions, easy questions, like the contribution of Plato or Aristotle to criticism, something like that, also could be asked. Alright, Unit 2 gives specific focus on imitation in art as put forth by Plato. There comes this theory of forms. I mentioned that. There could be a question on that, please make sure. Even if they ask you Plato for a short question, as we have already seen, make sure that you manage to write all the key points. There lies the challenge. At times you might have written about Plato, but would that suffice for that question? There comes the challenge. And Unit 3 deals with Aristotle's theory of imitation in detail. There you have aspects related to theatre. There could be questions on that too. Make sure that you study these units as mentioned in this block thoroughly. I mentioned there could be a question on tragedy from Aristotle. All those aspects are clearly mentioned in Unit 4. So I would say, with respect to Aristotle, Unit 4 is undoubtedly the most important unit, for it gives you distinguishing between myth or plot and ethos or character. I've seen essay questions likewise. It elaborates on the elements of tragedy, and many other significant aspects. Please make sure that you study this unit. And regarding catharsis, you have detailed explanation as part of Unit 5. Catharsis used to be a sure question for the short essay, but of late we have not been seeing catharsis, so there is this chance of them asking you catharsis this time. Unit 6 you can read, there wouldn't be a sure question from this. Okay, so once again let me remind you that with respect to block 2, you have again 6 units. Yeah, I would say 1 to 5. Units 1 to 5 are important, and depending on the question you will have to focus on which aspect you will have to write more and frame your answers effectively. It wouldn't be easy if you are not prepared enough. Anyway, I assure you that there would be essay question. I didn't say questions, essay question, yeah. From this block, one essay question is what I expect. Okay, shall we move on to the previous questions? Yeah, thank you. So firstly, we will discuss the short questions. For the June 2022 TEE, Plato was asked as of a short essay question. For the June 2021 TEE, there has been this short question on Hamartia. So if there is this question on Hamartia, who would be the critic involved? Hamartia? Exactly. You will have to mention Aristotle and all the relevant aspects. Another thing that I would like to clarify, would you write examples for Hamartia? Of course you are expected to. There wouldn't be specific mentions regarding examples, but my suggestion is that always substantiate your answer. For that matter, it is advisable not to frame your own examples. Okay? Take significant examples. For example, in case of Macbeth, the tragic flaw is ambition. In case of Hamlet, yes, procrastination. In case of Othello, it is jealousy. Okay, you can mention the 4 great tragedies by Shakespeare as an example. This is not mandatory, it's just a suggestion. Okay, and this question on Hamartia was actually frequently asked even for the prior TEE, that is the December 2020 TEE, there was this question on Hamartia. Now do you follow me why I actually asked you to refer to the previous question papers? I repeat, if you are lucky, you will see familiar questions in your June TEE question paper. Now we will focus on the essay questions. For the December 2022 TEE, there has been this question on theatre. The question was like, attempt a critique of the role of dance in the ancient Greek theatre. So if you receive such a question, you must have the idea that this is related to Aristotle. Your study material devotes an entire unit for this particular aspect. Unless you are prepared, you wouldn't be able to write this essay question effectively. There is this question on mythos and ethos, that is plot and character, asked for the December 2021 TEE. The question is as follows. Comment on Aristotle's views of mythos and ethos in the Poetics. So there you will have to mention the critic Aristotle and the specific work Poetics before moving on to the exact aspects related to mythos and ethos. That is the challenge there. There has been a common general question on the views of poetry by Aristotle, that is, This question was asked for the June 2021 TEE. The exact question was as follows. Comment on Plato's views on poetry. It's like a lottery. You have enough and more points to write when you receive such a question. Yeah. I told you there could also be compare and contrast questions. One such question was asked for the December 2020 TEE. The question was to compare and contrast Plato and Aristotle as literary critics. Okay, that is a very interesting yet challenging question. When you are asked to compare and contrast, what you are expected to do is not to elaborate on these two critics separately. You are expected to actually compare and contrast. So that would involve a lot of effort. So if you are not sure whether you could answer this question correctly, you may not choose that option. Alright? Yeah, that is what I told you. Smart work also matters. Now for the December 2019 TEE, there has been this question. Explain how Plato views art as twice removed from reality. So this is a very straight question. We all know how to explain on this aspect as it's mentioned in block 2 unit 2, I suppose. Alright. So those were the recent questions on block 2 as seen in the previous TEE question papers. Any doubts? So shall we move on to the next block? Coming up next is block 3, which is titled Romantic Criticism. I'm very sure you'll be interested in studying this. Of course, you should study this because I feel like this block is crucial in the sense there would be many questions from this particular block. In the sense, with respect to a very particular TE, there would probably be just one question, but this very question would probably appear for your TE. What I was intending to say is that for one particular TEE, you won't receive questions from all the 8 blocks. Do you follow me? Yeah. But there are certain blocks from which there would be sure question. That I could assure you. Okay. There wouldn't be questions from all the 8 blocks. But there are some very important blocks from which there would be at least one question. We'll discuss which all are those blocks in course of time. Just make sure that you study block 3-4. I've very often seen strong presence of block 3 in many of the TEE question papers. Interestingly, block 3 has just 4 units. The very first unit deals with an introduction to Romanticism. There is this aspect of romantic theory of art mentioned in page number 8. When you study Romanticism, there are bits of information given towards the end of unit 2 of block 1, where we discuss some of the characteristics of Romanticism. That also you will have to pay attention to. And as part of page number 16 or section 1.9, they discuss some modernist and post-structuralist views of Romanticism. There you have a mention of North of Rhine. And there is this mention of the Yale School, that is under section 1.9, the 3rd paragraph. Are you able to spot this idea in your textbook? The Yale School, Y-A-L-E. That could be a short question. So if they suddenly ask you about the Yale School, you would actually say this has not been taught to you. Move on to Unit 2. So Unit 2 is important. There could be essay questions. I said could be. There is this probability of there being an essay question from this unit. It deals with William Wordsworth, specifically the work Lyrical Ballads. So the preface to the Lyrical Ballads is of great importance. Whenever we discuss Romanticism, it is said that the Lyrical Ballads functioned as if the harbinger of the Romantic movement. I'm very sure that even for your BA courses, you must have studied the Lyrical Ballads. At least the mention of this particular work must have been there. And the year of publication is also very important. When was the Lyrical Ballads published? Any idea? Please study the year of publication. This was a volume of poems which was first published anonymously by two notable literary critics and poets, namely Wordsworth and Coleridge. So it was initially published in the year 1798. So that is very important. Please make sure that you have an understanding of this year. Yeah, 1798. I appreciate that. Then regarding William Wordsworth, there could be a question on poetic diction. That would be section 2.5 of your study material. Of course, Coleridge is also important. See, all my dear darling students of MEG-1, please study that Romanticism. So moving on to Coleridge, if you could follow section 2.6, there you could see Coleridge's view on Wordsworth's theory of diction. That is actually his view on Wordsworth's theory of diction. So never ever end your answer on Wordsworth's theory of diction without mentioning this aspect of Coleridge. This is one aspect that many of the learners might fail to mention. Alright, moving on to the separate unit devoted to Coleridge. Unit 3, this is also important. There could be an essay question. There is probability. Alright, that is, there could be a question on fancy and imagination as perceived by Coleridge. It could either be an essay question or a short question. In case of an essay question, you will have to mention Biographia Literaria, the specific work also. The last unit in this particular block, Unit 4, deals with P.B. Shelley, A Defense of Poetry. If you find this block difficult to study, it's your choice whether to study or not. I won't say there would be sure question from this unit, but you never know. If they feel like asking, they might ask. But when compared to Wordsworth and Coleridge from this particular block, the probability of the asking a question on a defense of poetry is low comparatively. Do you follow me? Now we will discuss block 3. Regarding the previous TE questions, there has been this question for the latest TEE, that is, what effect did the romantic stress on individuality and spontaneity of expression have on the choice of poetic forms? Yeah. So please make sure that you read and understand the question before answering it. So I told you there could be questions on either Wordsworth or Coleridge. So regarding Wordsworth, there has been this question for the June 2022 TEE, that is, comment on Wordsworth's preface to the Lyrical Ballads in light of the quotation, every great poet is a teacher. Okay, this has been asked for June 2022. There you will have to focus upon Romanticism, features of Romanticism, moving on to the Romantic critics with specific focus on Wordsworth, and mention the Lyrical Ballads as harbinger of the Romantic movement and give specific importance to the preface of the Lyrical Ballads and the contents. And that is how you frame the answer for this particular question. And there has been this question for the December 2021 TEE. It goes like, How does Romanticism differ from classicism of literary criticism? I repeat, how does Romanticism differ from classicism of literary criticism? So, when you receive such a question, will you attempt that question? You will? Of course, it's good to attempt provided you know the correct answer. Because they've asked you the difference. At times, what happens is that people do attempt such a question, but they just state what classical criticism is and what romantic criticism is. That wouldn't answer this question. The question was to state the difference. So make sure that you choose this option only if you are sure that you will be able to do justice to this question. Now, there has been this question, attempt a critique on romanticism. Attempt a critique on romanticism. This was a question for the June 2021 TEE. See, we are referring to the essay questions. Regarding Coleridge, there was this question to critically examine Coleridge's views on the exemplastic power of poetic imagination. Yeah, Coleridge and poetic imagination is an important area. So, my suggestion is that if they ask you a question, you need not restrict your answer just to the concept of poetic imagination as put forth by Coleridge. How do you frame your answer? You start off with the basic aspects of romanticism, classical features of romanticism. Make sure that you don't write too much. Restrict these aspects to a few sentences and then move on to the romantic critiques, and you start off with Coleridge from the second paragraph, provided first paragraph is not too long. Okay, some people they write more than one page on the general aspects, and they'll write just maybe one and a half papers on Coleridge. See, that wouldn't work. So that's all regarding block 3. See, I'm limiting my discussion to just a few of the latest previous TE questions. There are numerous question papers available on your official web page. If interested, you may check them out. Due to the restrictions, the time limitations of our counseling session, I'm just limiting my discussion to a few previous TEs. Is that fine? May I have some response, please? Interestingly, I haven't seen many questions, short note questions from romantic criticism. Occasionally they ask a few questions like maybe fancy imagination, poetic imagination, etc. Nevertheless, be prepared. Okay, let's not take chances. Anyway, if you are thorough with Indian aesthetics, you could surely attempt one question. And the other question, you could easily choose from the other four. That too will be from the most important blocks. We will discuss the most important blocks towards the end of this particular lecture. Now shall we move on to block 4? So regarding block 4, this is titled New Criticism. Okay, we already mentioned new criticism while we discussed the 20th century developments of literary criticism. That is unit 3 of block 1. Here in this particular block, we have around 6 units, out of which the first 5 units are important in the sense these units deal with specific critics in the field of new criticism. The first 2 blocks are very important. For example, for instance, this unit 1 deals with I.A. Richards. There could be a question on practical criticism, and that would be from unit 1. So you need to have an idea regarding the basics of new criticism. That is how it got formed, who were the key figures, and such aspects you need to be aware of. I.A. Richards is very important for that matter. He was a scholar of semantics, and he is associated with another critic, C.K. Ogden, and their collaboration also you need to have some clarity. Then he and language, Richards on language, those aspects are important. There is this concept of 4 kinds of meanings mentioned on page number 11. Is the page number correct? Page number 11, towards the end, you could see 4 points: sense, feeling, tone, intention. Yes, please mark that. There could be a question. Even if not, if they ask you a question on I.A. Richards, he could be a short note question. If so, please don't forget to mention these 4 kinds of meaning. Similarly, 2 uses of meanings are also important. That is, under section 1.5, the very first paragraph, last line. That is symbolic use of language and emotive use in poetry. That aspect also, please make sure that you mention if you write. Moving on, section 1.6 is very important. Thoroughly study that. I've seen many questions from section 1.6. What is practical criticism? If they ask you a question on practical criticism, make sure that you mention I.A. Richards. How can you answer this question even without mentioning I.A. Richards? That would happen only if you are not thorough with the concept. So that's all regarding practical criticism, and there is this mention of basic English too. Yeah. Moving on to Unit 2. Unit 2 is significant in the sense we all know how important T.S. Eliot is in the field of English literature. Unit 2 is regarding T.S. Eliot, and you could expect questions from T.S. Eliot. There could be even short questions like objective correlator. That is a concept put forth by T.S. Eliot. That could be a question for the short note, and even in case of essay questions, they could ask you to elaborate on his ideas as mentioned in Tradition and the Individual Talent. It is an essay. Then there is also another work, Function of Criticism, and there are other concepts like the dissociation of sensibility as mentioned by T.S. Eliot. So this falls under section 2.4. It is actually a literary term which was first used by T.S. Eliot. So that is also very important. And when you write objective correlative, please make sure that you write it was first used by T.S. Eliot in his essay Hamlet. Okay. And when you write works, make sure that you write it correctly. Work titles, okay, the names, follow proper capitalization and punctuation, okay, and the spelling should also be correct. Unless you know the correct year of publication, you don't have to worry about the year, because it's better not to write the wrong year of publication rather than not writing. Okay, that's all regarding that unit. Unit 3 deals with another critic. This is a new critic. His name is F.R. Lewis. It's always good to have an overview on F.R. Lewis. Okay. Now comes Unit 4. This is also important. I have seen essay questions on both the critics mentioned in Unit 4. As part of Unit 4, you have J.C. Ransom and Clean Brooks. So this Clean Brooks must be familiar because new criticism is prescribed for study even for BA days. Have you studied new criticism as part of your BA course? My humble suggestion is that when you study these new critics, make sure that you study the names of a few works written by them. That would actually help you write the introductory section. Okay, provided you write the correct work titles. Okay, and there is this Unit 5 on W.K. Wimsatt. I wouldn't say there would be essay questions, but still there could be questions on fallacies. There are 2 fallacies mentioned, namely affective fallacy and intentional fallacy. make sure that you have an idea of these two concepts too. It could also be part of short question. And the last unit, you need not study in detail for the TE. From the TE perspective, it's just a concluding section. Okay. The first 5 units are important. If you ask me which are the most important units, I would say units 1, 2 and 4. Units 1, 2 and 4. And when compared to the other units, this is an important block. In the sense, when compared to the other blocks of MEG-05, block 4 is important. That is, there will be at least one question from this block in all the TE question papers. Am I making sense to you? Do you follow me? Now we'll discuss some of the previous question papers. That is, there is this question asked for the December 2022 TEE. That is, what do you understand by intentional fallacy? So, intentional fallacy comes under W.K. Wimsatt, the new critic. That falls under Unit 5 of Block 4 of our prescribed study material. So, how do you answer this question? This question might seem very easy, but you will have to answer this smartly. In the sense, you would begin with a short introduction to new criticism, and you will mention the new critics and their contributions, a short mention, and you will move on to who? Exactly, W.K. Wimsatt. Spelling, yeah, you need to write the correct spelling because that would not be mentioned in the question paper. Then you will give an overview on Wimsatt, who he was, which are his major concepts and works maybe. And without much ado, you will mention what an intentional fallacy is. Another mistake that most of our students make is that even when they attempt an essay question on intentional fallacy, they fail to mention affective fallacy. Why is that so? I understand that was not exactly asked in the question paper, but it is an understood aspect. When you mention intentional fallacy, you will also passively mention affective fallacy, and it would be ideal if you could distinguish between these two. Remember, it's a 20-mark question. Alright? It would be wonderful if you could substantiate your answer with an example. That is the ideal way of writing. Moving on to the next question asked for the June 2022 TEE. The question was as follows: assess J.C. Ransom as a literary critic. See, this is a question from Unit 4 of our study material, John Crow Ransom. So, almost all of his contributions as mentioned in the unit should be touched upon. So, there was this question asked for the December 2021 TEE. Discuss Cleanbrook's idea on nature and the function of irony in poetry. Yeah. So this question is also from the same unit, same block, same unit. Unit 4 is titled J.C. Ransom and Cleanbrooks. So there lies the significance. You will have to thoroughly read and understand this particular unit. Okay, there was this another question on T.S. Eliot. What does T.S. Eliot mean by the dissociation of sensibility? I told you this could be a question. So, when you mention that, give passive remarks to other concepts like objective, correlative and others too. Do not limit your 20 marks essay just on dissociation of sensibility, but the importance should be ascribed to the dissociation of sensibility as such. Regarding the short questions, I've told you they could even ask specific concepts as short questions. It could be the 4 kinds of meanings by I. Richards, or even practical criticism by I. Richards, or even simple mention of I. Richards for that matter. Okay, please be prepared. So that would do regarding block 4. Everything clear so far? Now let's focus our attention towards block 5, Marxist view of literature. Here also you have around 6 units. Unit 1 gives you the basic overview of Marxism and literature. What is Marxism? The basics are discussed here. I don't think there would be a question as such from that. And there could be a question on the relevance of Marxism to literature. Such a question I have seen for the TEEs. This could even be an essay question. For that matter, you need to know how Marxism and literary criticism are related. Okay, the writings of Marxist critics such as Raymond Williams, Frederick Jameson and Terry Eagleton should be taken into account. So these 3 are the notable Marxist critics. Who are they? Raymond Williams, Frederick Jameson and Terry Eagleton. Remember Terry Eagleton, we met him even as part of unit 4 of block 1. It's the same Terry Eagleton. So if in case they ask you short notes on these people, you need to identify that these are Marxist critics. There lies the challenge. The second unit is on society and history, Marxist view. There you'll have to focus your attention towards structure or mode of production. There could be a question on that. Unit 3 deals with the concept of superstructures. This aspect you need to study. If at all there comes a question, that question will be on superstructure. So I would say unit 3 is the most important unit with respect to block 5. Unit 4 deals with commitment in literature, whereas unit 5 deals with autonomy in literature. And the last unit deals with literature and ideology. These units you can just read and understand, units 5 and 4. Maybe unit 6, as it deals with the concept of ideology, you can pay attention because it discusses what do class society and class ideas signify. That aspect, please go through that. What if they ask you an essay question? Because there used to be questions on ideology and ideological state apparatus as short notes for the past TEs, not the recent ones. I am referring to the past TEs. Regarding the previous questions, there has been questions, essay questions, to discuss the role of superstructure in Marxist criticism. So this has been a repeated question. A very recent mention was in June 2022 TE question paper. For the December 21 question paper, they asked you, how do Marx and Engels interpret literature? I told you that is an important aspect, how it is connected to literature. So those who are studying this block, please make sure that you study Marxism and literature, the concept of superstructure, and the last unit, literature and ideology. So in short, units 1, 3 and 6 are very significant. There has been repeated questions on what is superstructure in Marxist criticism. Even for December 2019 TEE, this question was asked. And there has been short notes on ideology, ideological state apparatus, superstructure and others. Alright, there we end this discussion. We'll continue the discussion on blocks 6 to 8 in the upcoming session.